Are we supposed to be silent now?
Please.
Okay.
All right. Now I can get back on my Zoom. I apologize. Oh, we got some more people. I'm sorry. I was just tweeting out the link. Hi.
Yeah, I was sending email and I looked up and suddenly there was a crowd.
I know what I don't have the waiting room anymore because you know what? You guys can be there when I'm not now. So, yeah, how's everyone doing?
Good. Kind of dragging ass. I don't know why. I have like a Sunday, don't want to do anything vibe, but it's Thursday and I do have shit to do. So I'm in an odd.
I'll tell you why.
Oh.
I'm a doctor. I've diagnosed it. You watched fights last night.
Right? I'm conditioned to think that I could chill now.
Sunday that you.
Yeah.
But I can't. I was like, wait, it's Thursday? Damn. What?
I know. But you guys are all, live on YouTube. I just want to reminders. But I'm very excited. Let's see. It is 4:01. I love how you guys are getting class on time.
I know, right? We are.
Look at that. Brian, you are well on getting your master's in writing and fighting.
All right. I love how whenever Josh comes in, it always looks like he's just come from being rescued from some mountain expedition or something. Josh just kind of barrels into these in a way that I always appreciate.
And Josh always does some sort of movement, whether it's sports or something, and so it's nice.
Finally nice here. It's finally, after, as you guys know, just like this endless winter. It's finally nice.
Yeah. No, I was wearing my Uggs when I went to the drugstore, and I was just like, oh man, finally.
It was 98 yesterday.
Oh.
It snowed 3 days ago.
That's insane.
It snowed 3 days ago.
Where are you based out of, Josh?
Hey man, I'm in Jersey right now. I usually live in Brooklyn, but I'm in Jersey.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He got out.
Got out.
Yeah.
You wanted to go from the most dangerous place to the second most dangerous place.
It's progress, right?
Yeah.
Baby steps.
Okay. Let me just check messages here. Making sure. Oh, and I want to make sure that I check the YouTube. Let me for the live chat, because did anyone notice that there was some chatter?
Oh, really?
Yes. Did you see it, Josh?
I did not. No.
Because I think someone was I think it disappears when the live streaming goes off. Someone was taking issue with your stats on Ferguson.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, yes,
Well, I'm the guy with the microphone.
But there's always going to be someone who's going to, yeah. So it's so funny. Okay, so here we go. And so hopefully, we can start introducing ourselves, or maybe just give it, a few more minutes.
I've been waiting to see a Zoom bomb happen. That's actually why I've been tuning into so many of these, is because I've just been waiting. I've been hearing so much about these Zoom bombs, and I just feel like I want to be present when I see a Zoom bomb happen, but they never happen on your channel here, Nancy.
I know. Well, before did I have require a passcode in the other ones? I'm trying to remember. Now I'm doing one for my personal meeting room. So we'll see if because it's just one code. So we'll see. I have students who've told me that they had classes that were Zoom bombed.
Is that literally just someone who wasn't supposed to be there just pops up?
Yeah, because Zoom, they weren't ready for this, right? And so I don't know if you guys noticed on the screen, it just says Zoom meeting. Well, it used to have the meetings number, the room number. And so people could, if you were sharing your screen or something, or doing something like this, they could just see it, and then they get into your meeting, especially if you're live streaming. And so my students said that they actually had a YouTuber come in, a fame, and do silly stuff. I don't know what it was. Did you get Zoom bombed, Atticus?
I have not been Zoom bombed. I've not had that pleasure. So
I had that pleasure.
There was a class at Brockport where someone came in and started yelling racist insults before they got kicked out. So that's what's happened more with college classes where people are coming in and just saying offensive things.
Yeah, I saw that happen that with the NHL had to deal with that too. I think it was a cat from the Rangers was doing like a fan engagement thing, and some hacker came in and was just like flooding the chat with N-word and all that stuff. And yeah, I've seen more of like, I haven't been a part of one, but I've mostly just heard of like the bad versions of Zoom bombing.
I would love for it to exist in some ways that were actually creative and sort of interesting, or pushing the envelope, some sort of ontological anarchist kind of thing, or, you know, something where it's like, I don't know, we got Zoom bomb, but now I feel this deep potential for the rest of my life that I never sensed before, or, you know, or something, right? Like I feel like there could be some positive things you could do with Zoom bomb, like poetic terrorism is it's called, right? But I'm not seeing it.
You just summed up our whole vision of the internet, where we hope for good things, and instead we just get the racist insults.
Right.
But we know what it could be.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, at least we're connected.
Yeah.
Or like a Zoom Kool-Aid man to just come in and just and then leave. Like, that would be fun.
Yeah, that's also a very dated reference.
I'm old. Thanks.
I've said that before, and people have looked at me funny.
Atticus, do you get the Kool-Aid reference?
I have seen
Okay.
it, Michaels.
Okay. All right. It's still relevant.
Nice.
Oh, here's Ant. Hello. Let's audio connect.
Are we being Zoom bombed?
Hello, Ant. Welcome to Writing Fighting.
How you doing? Sorry I'm a little late. I had to download a couple of programs, and apparently my computer is locked up. Not like 1,000 approvals for this to work.
I understand. Is this your first Zoom video conference?
It is. It is.
Wow. Well, you know what? I'll take you through it. You
Awesome.
know, this is what I've done with my students sometimes. And then we're going to introduce you to the seminar.
Okay.
I've got, and some students are kind of come in a little later. But if you see, you never need to mute yourself in these kind of seminars, but it's the mute button is at the, where is it, you guys? It's at the top right of your square, or at the bottom left of the screen, the bottom left of the screen. And then if you go a little further to the right, there's a chat feature. If someone needs to run out and there's conversation going, please feel free. And we're not going to be doing any polling or breakout rooms as of now, but I think you're going to be fine. You've got the headset, so you look like you've done this a million times.
Yes, this is my son's for when he watches YouTube late at night and I'm trying to watch a TV show. So, thanks to him.
Love it. So we're going to go around the room here, and everyone kind of just share where you're from, because this is a great seminar with Ant Evans. I'm going to introduce you in the proper academic way. So I will introduce you last, Ant. But we've got some people who come from other parts of academia. I've got an alumnus from my class, fellow writers and artists, and then we will get to you, Ant, and then I can't wait. We're going to discuss your background, the role of PR, and then we're going to do some discussions where we get into what, we were talking about this, is there honor in modern combat sports?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is the, so we're going to get into the weeds in the theory and philosophy. So I'll go first. I am Nancy Kidder. I teach writing and fighting at American University. I've been doing it since 2017. And I love how combat sports lends itself to narrative. It's, the stories behind it, but also you can take rhetorical maneuvers in great nonfiction as well and learn to be a more effective writer. So I'm going to go to Kyle next. Kyle, tell us about yourself.
Just unmuting. I'm going to have my mute on a lot because I have a dog in the background. So I am Kyle Green. I am coming to you from Western New York. I'm a professor of sociology at SUNY Brockport. And my research is around how people construct meaning through engaging in physical practice. So a lot of my work is on people training in mixed martial arts, the stories they tell in the gym, the desire that gets them to the gym, and then why they stay there. So I think that's it.
Thank you. All right, Brian, you are next on mine.
Hey, so Brian Siskind, I'm co-host of the Art Fight podcast. We sort of explore the intersection of art and combat. And so sometimes we talk to artists, writers, musicians, and sometimes we talk to fighters or coaches or fighters that are musicians and musicians that are fighters or whatever. So it's sort of an intersection sort of point that we sort of explore with our podcast. And then otherwise I'm an artist and a producer in many different realms, but ultimately film and music. And happy to be here as always.
Thank you, Brian. Josh, you're next on my Brady Bunch screen.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Josh Rosenblatt, and I'm the author of Why We Fight, available now on paperback. And Ant, I don't know if you remember, but we used to work together a little bit years ago. You would help me out. I was the editor-in-chief of Fightland, and you're my guy. You were my guy at the UFC, so it's good to see you.
You too, man.
Great. And Tanisha, please tell us about yourself.
Sure, unmuting. Hi, I'm Tanisha. I am a professor at Fielding Graduate University in their media psychology program. I teach classes on community and media psychology. When I finished my PhD about 3 years ago in that field, I studied most of my research primarily on the sports and society and digital communication space, kind of like where they all intersect. Really interested in fan identity, community management, engagement, and kind of the how digital communication can serve marginalized groups and communities and stuff like that. And so background in traditional entertainment, a lot of radio, a lot of podcasts, some screenwriting and stuff. So now I'm pivoting to focus more on the combat sports and professional wrestling space to help tell these storyful experiences.
Excellent. Thank you, Tanisha. And Atticus, my alumnus. He just took the class this spring, and I am being serious. He has an MMA IQ of knowledge that even I think is more than myself, but I don't mind it. But Atticus, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Atticus. I'm currently in rural Oregon because of being sent home. Student American University, big combat sports fan.
Great. So glad to have you here, Atticus. All right. So you guys, it is May 14th, 2020. This is our second class, and I'm introducing a very special guest. Please welcome Anthony Ant Evans. And to give you a sense, he has been in the boxing and MMA world for a long time. And we'll just get into it. There are stories that were captivating when I talked to Ant the other day, and I started reading The Ultimate Insider. He spent 12 years.
You're the one. Thank you.
No, he spent 12 years with the Ultimate Fighting Championship as the head of media relations, fighter development, and finally the content chief for UFC Fight Pass. Ant worked hand in glove with the greatest mixed martial artists in history, helping tell the stories of people like Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, everyone that we know of. So you also, I love this, you're the de facto company fight historian. And
I was.
Well, you are to us. History is always there. And the modern incarnation, or you created the modern incarnation of the UFC Hall of Fame. And since leaving UFC in early 2019, you continued to consult with major fight organizations. And then you co-authored Quitters Never Win, the best-selling autobiography of your close friend, UFC Hall of Famer Michael Bisping. And now you also have, and I'm telling everybody, subscribe, go, run on your Twitter. And I know that's where I found it. But let us know if there's another way to access it. It's this amazing series of stories, but stories of insider, stranger than fiction kind of things that you wouldn't believe. I just happened to read the one with Mark Coleman in the hotel.
Oh God, did you? Are you still on to me on? That's crazy.
Oh my gosh. But you have pieces that kind of contemplate fear. And, you go into the biology with the amygdala and why fighters, never admit they're afraid.
Mhm.
And I really want to delve into this. So, you know, for this crew, this is the ultimate insider is the ultimate. So we will be getting into that. So you are a storyteller, Ant.
Thank you. What an introduction. Now I'm you know, am I ever going to live up to that? But I'll do my best.
So I think, you know, we could do a fast forward. Let's talk about the ultimate insider. But actually, it was so interesting learning about your background. And, you know, I think it's for the students out there who are watching and Atticus, how you went from being a journalist in a newspaper and realizing that wasn't going to be a good fit, and how you found yourself in the role of PR. Could you kind of give us an insight?
Yeah, I mean, I did a professional postgrad course called the NCTJ. I think it's National Council Training of Journalists, that in the UK, where you know, I still got the remnants of a British accent. You may be able to tell I'm from England, but yeah, I wanted to be a journalist, wanting to write for a living, and you know, I did the NCTJ. You know, did okay at that. Well, never got my shorthand, but they kind of 100 words a minute, but they kind of forgave me of that. And I took a job at a local newspaper, and this real first week, I was like, yeah, this really isn't for me. There was an incident where they were like, hey, are you taking this seriously or not? And I was like, you know what, for 12,000 a year, maybe not. And what I really want to do is write about boxing, be involved in, you know, which was combat sports. There wasn't any kind of, I was a big UFC fan, but there was, you know, nobody was making money, including the promoters, UFC at the time. So, and there's certainly no platform or avenue to go from living in the middle of England to working for the UFC, you know, in the late 90s. You know, who knows if there was going to be a UFC was basically the thinking. And yeah, I mean, I just kind of, I used to attend a lot of boxing shows, and would see, you know, a lot of the same faces. And I happened to talk to a guy called Adam Smith, who was a young commentator at the time. He's now head of boxing for all of Sky Sports, which is kind of like the ESPN of the UK. And got to know him a little bit. He helped me get an internship at Sky Sports. And while I was there, you know, I attended parties and stuff like that. And it's just, you know, social networking before there was a social network. You know, I just meet people and get along with them. And I met a guy called Mark Butcher, who wrote for Boxing News. He left Boxing News and started up his own website with, you know, with a serious financial backing, because everybody was going to be an internet millionaire in 2000. You know, if you're old enough to remember that, we got massive traffic. I was like, okay, how much money are we making? Oh, zero. When we're losing 15 grand a month. Okay, well, if you say it's going to work, okay. But and yeah, I'm from working at Seconds Out. At one point, I thought, you know what? There's got to be an easy way to make a living in boxing. There are a lot of people making a living here, and I'm consistently owed thousands of dollars as the life of a freelancer. And then, so I made the move to PR and represented a guy called Ricky Hatton, who was a huge star in the UK, and, you know, eventually became a huge star worldwide. And from doing public relations for Ricky Hatton, managed to parlay that. Again, it's just through meeting people and, you know, becoming friends with people, you know, owing favors, taking favors from people. I found myself in front of a guy called Marshall Zelaznik, who was a new executive the UFC had hired to open up and run the UFC's UK office. Got along with Marshall, you know, he said, no, what would you do? How do you think we should proceed? I thought I nailed the interview. I remember calling my dad and it's like, how did that interview go with that American? I was like, oh, I absolutely nailed it. I just know, I just, you know, I was so nervous before Amber, I just nailed it. And what I didn't know is Marshall turned to one of his colleagues who had interviewed me, Jackie Parajian, and goes, basically, I don't understand a word that guy just said for an hour, but he sounds pretty confident, so maybe we should hire him. So that's how I got the job at the UFC. And then I was head of UK PR, and that kind of expanded into different regions of the world. And yeah, I was with UFC for 12 years. That's kind of like shot by in like seemingly 12 minutes. So in a nutshell, that's how I got involved in the fight sport.
And yeah, nothing happened in those 12 years.
Hardly anything.
Hardly anything.
Hardly anything.
No, I need to go more into this. And okay, let's go back to boxing. Because we had this exchange where you said, people think Dana White is bad. Boxing sometimes shows like a different level. But what is the major differences that you've found between boxing versus MMA?
Yeah, I mean, in boxing, everybody hates each other. It's I remember seeing I worked with a small hall promoter, and we were trying to get a TV deal, and we were pitching. I think it was BBC or Sky, and it was a new sports executive who had a background in soccer, cricket, those sorts of things, and he just like kind of put his hands up. He was like, "I don't get about your business is everybody hates each other." It's like most sports, they want to have the biggest mansion on the block.
Yeah.
Boxing doesn't work like that. They don't care if they live in a pigsty, as long as they blow up everybody else's mansion. That is how boxing operates, and that's how boxing still operates. I mean, Dana White was taking a very strong look at getting involved, and I'm like, yeah, no one cooperates there.
And is that because of the Muhammad Ali Act? Because fighters now wait a long time or has it always been like that in boxing?
No, it's always been like that. The Muhammad Ali Act is, in my opinion, I don't want to drag it into a segue, but the Muhammad Ali Act had a negligible effect on boxing. It was essentially a vehicle, not unlike the famous human cockfighting extravaganza. It was a vehicle for Senator John McCain to advance his political career. Even the name Muhammad Ali Act. Why'd you pick that name? Oh, because it pops on a headline. It did very, very little.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so and Kyle, you're our sociologist. I want you to come in here too, because you think what we hear about it is it empowered the fighter, right? That it allowed them to have their own promotion, and they could.
Well, they could always have that. They could always have your own promotion.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no barrier to entry to being a fight promoter. It's very easy to get a license pretty much anywhere in the world. And if you're willing to risk the money and set up a promotion, you can.
Do it. No PhD involved.
Yeah, there's very little barrier to entry to becoming a fight promoter. A lot of people have tried it and lost their money. Oh, geez, you don't just pass out a flyer and people show up and buy tickets. It's more complicated than that, is it? Yeah, I mean, then fighters could have done that at any point.
Well, then, can you tell me what makes a good promoter? You mentioned, is it Barry Hearn?
Barry Hearn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a lot of respect for him now.
Yeah.
Yeah. What makes a good one? Because I'll be honest, most of us think of boxing promoters. We think about, I think, Frankie Carbo. We think of Don King. We think of not very positive images.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, look, I would separate Carbo and King a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the job of a fight promoter is to put on fights that people will pay to see. Mm-hmm. And from there, then through good promotion, find even more people, now the fight is made, who will be interested in paying to see it. And that is it. It's a very simple task, very hard to accomplish.
Yeah.
That is what a fight promoter do. And no, I mean, Dane is one of the people who takes it, if it's a crappy fight, he really takes it to heart, really to this day, he will, you interviewed and say, what was the most disappointing? It was like BJ Penn versus GSP. We did all this amazing promotion. We did the first, prime time on it. We had cameras going 24/7 on both of them. We spent a ton of money and the fight didn't deliver. I was like, well, you can't really affect that, Dana.
Yeah.
But the fight promoter's job is to get that feeling. That feeling, because you're all fight fans. You must be, because you're doing this course. That feeling in the last few seconds before, when the cage door shuts or when everybody except the referee and the fighter steps between the ropes of a boxing ring. And they're just looking at each other, and you're just waiting for the timekeeper to go ding, just those, and anything can happen. Like, oh my God, anything can happen in the next 25 minutes or 36 minutes if it's boxing. If you're excited during those few seconds, then the promoter's done his job.
Yeah.
At that point, the promoter can't make it any more or less exciting than possible, unless they're Gary Shaw, and then they will try. But you know what I mean.
Okay, I really want to get into this. Kyle, do you have anything to talk about with the boxing versus?
Yeah, I was just curious as a follow-up question to what you were explaining, if you see things that Dana White has done particularly different than boxing promoters, because one of the classic stories, and I think it's too simplistic, is that Dana White promotes the UFC over the fighters. So some people don't even know who the fighters are who's fighting that night. They know that the UFC is on, right? And they don't even know that the UFC is actually mixed martial arts. They just know UFC is a thing. And you don't see that as much with boxing promoters. The boxing promoters, you know the headliner, you know the two people fighting, and that's it. But is there really that much of a difference, or is that just kind of that narrative that's been reproduced over and over?
I mean, that is the case in some ways. I mean, Dana said it, one of his go-to things he said for 20 years is the UFC, what he did is he looked at what was wrong with boxing and it's like, right, we'll do the opposite. With the UFC, you know, for the majority of the Zuffa era, for far and away more events than not, if it's a UFC event, you know you're going to get good matches. You know you're not going to get matches that you'll see in boxing where it's like, he is a former Olympian or a future star, and he is some pansy we brought in with a losing record to get knocked about so we can get him experience. You know, that doesn't happen in the UFC. It's, you know, and it doesn't happen in MMA, period, because the UFC's kind of set that agenda. And it's about a brand. I mean, what is boxing as a brand? Nobody, and now it's because the way it's been developed over the last 150, 300 years, if you want to go back that far to the Tom Cribb era, no one's been able to create a brand around it. And all a brand is really is a promise to your customer. It's like, if you buy this iPhone, it will be just as good as the last iPhone and just as intuitive, and it will be cutting edge. It's merely a promise. So the promise of the UFC brand is you're going to get high production values. You're going to get, it's going to look familiar. You're not going to go, well, what the heck is this version of the UFC? You know, it's going to look like the UFC, and you're going to get, you know, 50-50 matches up and down the card, or as close to as possible, with, you know, a handful of exceptions which are only stick out because they are exceptional. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think it's so interesting. The boxing matches that I've been to, the undercard is just despicable. I mean, I'm just like on the two. I went to the Lomachenko, I think it was Santos. It was here in DC, and it just, the matches were either, and Kyle, we've been talking about this, and Brian, the manager actually threw in the towel because he knew it was such a mismatch. But you didn't have the quality up until maybe the co-main, but it was just the main. And that's what the whole event was geared toward. It wasn't about, oh, you're going to have some interesting matches and it's going to be this whole big content. No, so you're bringing to mind as well, you're talking about what, you know, UFC has created. And you came in there. Did they have someone who was doing PR as well with the storytelling, or is that something that you kind of brought from boxing?
No, the UK, they had a PR team in the US, but I literally was on an island in the UK. I had to handle things my own way, and you know, there've been some outstanding people who worked in the UFC's PR department, like Karen Bell, Isabel Hodge. Linnea Breckenridge, who's head of PR right now, is fantastic. Everyone I just mentioned is better than me at corporate communications.
Okay. Yeah.
That's kind of bores me. Now I don't work there anymore. It kind of bores me a bit. I like telling stories about fighters. I like it working with a journalist, you know, figuring out what pitch will fit what journalist and get them excited. It's a lot like, you know, when you're a writer, you have an idea and you develop a story, and you know, you know, usually when you're on, like, if it's a long form, something that you usually by like 1,500 words in, some of the enthusiasm's gone. When PR, it doesn't happen, because what you do is you have the idea that you pitch it to someone, they do it, and they figure it out. They take the cool concept you've created and do most of the hard work. And you go, well, hey, look what I did. And when I was, that's why I decided I could probably make a decent fist of being a PR person. Is when I was a freelance writer, it was a lot of calling editors up, and you've got a couple of minutes of their busy day to pitch them something. And I thought, more often than not, I go, yeah, sure, we'll have 300 words of that, or yeah, you got 1,700 words on that. Can you have it by Thursday? And I just got good at pitching media people. I don't know anything about this corporate communication stuff. I'm not really sure I'm that interested in learning it. But what I do know is how to pitch a good story. I know how to create a good story, and I recognize, most important, because you can't create a star. People are either stars or they're not. No one sat Ronda Rousey or Conor McGregor down and said, okay, so what you do is this. Here the line. It doesn't happen like that. And even if somebody did it as an experiment, it would be a disaster. Because people can tell, and there are fighters right now in the UFC who are trying to be a Michael Bisping or a Conor McGregor. And it's like, you're just not charismatic. You don't have the charisma to carry this off. Stop. You're not helping yourself. But yeah, so that's another thing. Again with PR, it's another secret, shouldn't really be a secret of good PR, is having relationships. So I had friends in the boxing scene. I can argue by example. So a friend of mine, Kevin Francis, who was 20, 30 years, have been the boxing correspondent for the Daily Star, which in the UK at the time had a circulation of about 280,000 readers. Almost all of them were young males. I'm like, okay, we got to be in the Daily Star. We got to be in the Daily Star. And you can pitch on merit all you want, but they don't have to. It's newspapers are businesses. First and foremost, they don't have to cover your thing, and you can send them bullet points about how popular the UFC is versus boxing, and you're not going to go, what? Congratulations, you just beat me on this academic argument. We're now not going to cover Joe Calzaghe because you've pointed out that Michael Bisping has better metrics. It doesn't work like that. You've got to find a human interest, or you've got to find a human way in. So with Kevin Francis, I knew that he was pretty pissed off because his newspaper had just hired away their top rival, the Sun's lead sports columnist, a guy called Brian Woolner, sadly passed away. So not only would he cover all the best soccer matches, he would cover the biggest cricket, the Olympics, the Commonwealth Games. And yes, he would be going to the big New York, Las Vegas fights with the Nazim Hameds, the Lennox Lewises, the Joe Calzaghes. And because they had to justify the salary they were paying him, he had to cover the big sports. Kevin was pretty pissed off because he liked going to Las Vegas 3 times a year, expensing meals and having fun and getting drunk. He liked that. And who doesn't? So here's here, I've got an idea. So I went to his editor, Howard Weecroft at the time, and was like, look, how about Kevin becomes the UFC columnist and he can still come to Las Vegas 3 times for big fights? He said, he doesn't know anything about it. I said, don't worry, I know plenty. I can tell him what's a good story, what's it now. I can correct him, it's not middleweight, it's light heavyweight, the weights are different, stuff like that. Don't worry. I'll make sure nothing goes to print that's going to embarrass you guys. And that's how we got the world's first weekly column in any nation's national newspaper. And it's all about, it wasn't on merit. It was just a human. One guy was pissed off. His editor felt bad that he was pissed off, and that's an opportunity. That's an opportunity for the UFC at the time.
I love that you took advantage of that, of making sure that writer could go to Vegas.
Yeah.
And then that helps you. I mean, yeah, you do. It is this kind of negotiation. And I love that you also were fighting for MMA, where, right now it's the only live sport in town. You were saying that in England, it would be cricket or polo. Those would be what was covered.
Oh, on the BBC. Yeah. So, the first 3 years of me working in the UFC was getting any kind of coverage.
Mm.
It's hard to be like the head of PR, and there's no links to send around, no scans of newspapers or magazines, for so many weeks, where you're like, but Marshall Selaznik, who hired me, is to this day like a mentor to me. He understood how hard it was to get earned media, when they were just implacable. Like, we don't need to cover it. We don't need to. The only exception, and you can't take offense, because it's their business. They don't have to cover it. They don't have to. You can't make them. You can put your best argument. It's like, look, you're covering Amir Khan with 4 people at ringside, and Amir Khan draws these TV ratings and it's got 7,000 people in the arena. Then 2 weeks later, Michael Bisping headlines a UFC card in the same arena, and there's 18,000 people there, and this many people are watching on TV. So what are you doing? Maybe you'll sell more newspapers. Maybe more of your existing readers want to read about this than Amir Khan. They don't have to listen to that. The exception is the BBC, which is in the UK is funded by a license fee. It's essentially a tax. I mean, people who don't pay their license fee in the UK ultimately go to prison. Well, that's a tax by another name. Any American go, yeah, I know what that is called. It's called a tax. I did argue that you have to cover this, because you have to. You are honor bound. You are duty bound to cover this. So that's what we were talking about before. That is the time I didn't go softly, like, well, it's got a cool story, or that was like, you've got to cover that.
Yes, and threatened the BBC with a lawsuit.
Not a lawsuit,
but
I weaponized social media. I got a lot of UFC fans to they do have an independent kind of government quango body, that the BBC Complaints Commission. So we bombarded those people with complaints
because they were a public entity, as that tax go into them, and so you got to for me, a lover of combat sports, you're doing God's work there in terms of saying, please. Yeah. So sometimes you have to weaponize.
But it was implacable though there, because even when they have this show once a year called the BBC Sports Personality of the Year, and it's all the critique was it was never poor people sports like soccer and boxing. It was always polo and tennis and people like that, and they wouldn't. I remember once when Joe Calzaghe was, I think he'd just beaten Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones in the same year, incredible achievements. And when they were showing highlights of everyone's sports, they showed, when it came to showing Joe, who was a contender, I don't know if he won it or not, but they showed him hitting a heavy bag. I'm like, he's not the world champion boxerciser, he's the world champion boxer. And he doesn't hit heavy bags only in training. No one pays to see him rough up, an Everlast 200-pounder. They paid to see him beat Roy Jones and Bernard Hopkins, but they wouldn't show it because there's people getting hurt. I mean, 15 minutes before, they'd shown like a crash in Formula One where people had broken their necks and stuff, but that apparently is kosher.
I think that's a narrative with combat sports, is it's violence. It's uncivil. And, I think there's always times where it goes, where people will take offense to it. Yeah. We've been doing it since, all of humankind. We've been involved in this. So,
can I ask a follow up to that? Do you mind, or?
Please.
How did you navigate that tension? And this is something I'm always interested in. It's kind of my recurring question when I'm on these when on these recordings. But how did you navigate that tension where you could see that even with boxing, they weren't showing a match, and then you're trying to tell stories about the UFC and MMA, which was seen as even more violent. So did you lean into the kind of violence, or did you try to make it look like something that was more easily digestible?
Well, with the BBC, I never got the truck over the line. People who follow me in the UK, Vicky Colligan and Dave Shaw, as UFC became bigger and bigger and just wasn't an American fad that was popular for a summer or two, I think it became harder. The BBC's position became harder and harder and harder to justify, but they got it over the line. I didn't. And my is I was a UFC fan since 1994. very passionate. One of the reasons, what made me good at my job there also was a handicap, is I would take it personally. And the BBC, like I said, I took it personally. I didn't put my best foot forward always with that pitch. So other people got that over the line, but that whole period of my career and for the UFC's development, not just in the UK, but 5 years later, I was having the same conversations in Canada and Australia. Is the same sort of things. It's violent. It's human cockfighting. That human cockfighting phrase is like a zombie phrase. You still, even now, the New York Times are trotting it out. It's like, it's unkillable. It's unkillable. I actually wrote one of the things, I think a couple of days before I took the job at the UFC, I'd kind of agreed to it, but we were still, negotiating. I thought, what can I do what can I do like right now to get ahead of it? As I contacted Sandon McCain's office, and lo and behold, he'd long since moved on and changed his mind. So I got this rescinded his human cockfighting comment. He rescinded it now, I think 13 years ago, 2007, but you'll still see human cockfighting. Some people have called it human cockfighting. I'm like, you know what? 13 years ago, a guy said it, but that's just how I operate. It's like a zombie meme. It's just absolutely even zombies, if you chop that off, they'll die.
So you're saying it's super easy to start a promotion. I heard you say this. It's super easy. Anybody can do it.
Anyone can do it.
I also heard you say that the phrase human cockfighting is just, it will not die.
No.
Somebody just needs to reclaim it and form a promotion around it.
Called human cockfighting.
Yes.
There you go.
And just
Genius.
Let's just be done with it.
Genius. You'll get attention.
I know.
There you go. Love it. That's a smart man.
We're learning.
Yeah.
This is a place of education right here. So I'd like to get into also the storytelling. And can you tell us about maybe one of your first realizations, or one that you saw a fighter see a storyline and it worked or broke through, or a memorable one?
Yeah, I mean, Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy.
Can you take to that? I mean, we think of him.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So even before I worked with the UFC, I would attend, for my sins, as many local level MMA shows as I could, and I knew Dan Hardy was a star. I knew he was a star who just hadn't been exposed to a big enough audience to justify the term star. I couldn't wait to get him in the UFC. I was stupid enough and naive enough to think that it was kosher to call Joe Silver up, the UFC matchmaker, and suggest that they sign him. And when people in the UFC learned that I'd done that, they're like, "And you're still alive?" I was like, "Well, Joe is really nice. He was really amenable. What are you talking about?" Well, apparently that wasn't the dumb thing. You didn't suggest to Joe Silver that maybe he had overlooked a super talent and stuff. But
no.
yeah. And then, his first fight, he matched him with Akihiro Gono, who was like known as just an absolute spoiler. And I called him back. I said, "What?" Now Joe does an impression of me calling him up. "What are you doing? It's gonna be no sport." I don't talk that high a pitch voice ever. I didn't say that, Joe. I was upset. I didn't like that match for the unveiling of my second British star along with Michael Bisping. But yeah, I mean, with Dan, he had a sense of humor and kind of swaggering attitude. The mohawk, nobody else looked like that. The tattoos. I knew we had footage of him from when he was 17, instead of going like I did when I was 17 to go get drunk on a beach in Magaluf. This is what most English 17-year-old boys do. He went to Tibet to train with Shaolin monks and eat a handful of rice and do press-ups in the lotus position. And I was like, that's it. That was his idea of a good time. Or at the same time, juxtaposed with that, he's a punk rocker. There's a reason he's still around now and he hasn't had a fight in six years, and he's creating this little mini media empire around himself. So I couldn't wait to get Dan Hardy there in the UFC, and I knew he'd be successful.
So you talk about like going to these smaller I call them the minor league promotions around there. Was that also, were you kind of like a scout, or or were you mostly also taking fighters that had made it to the UFC and then crafting their?
Yeah, I wasn't the scout. I mean, I might mention to Joe Silva, like I saw, I don't know, Jimmy Wildhead, he's getting better and better, or stuff like that. But that's more just there was only so many of us who were fight geeks who could have that conversation. But no, I wasn't scouting for talent. But if Dan Hardy's if Dan Hardy has won every title out there, or it was only a matter of time before he got the opportunity to come to the UFC. So I want to know something about him beforehand, and maybe even know him a little bit before he came to the UFC. But I did. The other way of doing that is obviously I must have been to see Michael Bisping and Dan Hardy train 100 times each. So you don't just see them train and take media to see them, but the training with other people who all want to be in their position. So I got to know the Paul Kellys and the Paul Dailies before they came in the UFC. So yeah, just got to PR person is supposed to know as much, if not more, about what it is they're PRing as a journalist. Because how else can you pitch them if you don't know more? What are you pitching? Should do a story about Michael Bisping. He's a trash talker. Yeah, we're already on that, Ant. Thanks, but what am I pitching?
Well, also this is interesting. Like, where do you get this information? Because there are more introverted fighters. I think, oh gosh, some the people who never talked. Grigor Masasi. I think I'm saying that right.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do to find out the information? Do you have to tell them, like, sometimes, like, you should be talking about this?
Oh yeah, that's a constant. That's the constant struggle of a PR person. Absolutely, yeah.
So you have to go research or do some interviews and.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you've been, I mean, always like one of my tutors in my journalism course said the best two questions he was talking about journalists, but it could be any interviewer. Maybe if you're entertainment journalist, you don't have to be a journalist. You could be doing anything. You could be doing a puff piece documentary that's going to run for 5 minutes during Pop Idol or American Idol. The best questions to ask are usually why. They say something, why? Because if you keep asking why, you have to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the answer. And the other one is, well, how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel? How did that make you feel? Because people want to form an emotional connection through a TV medium. You just need to be able to, you don't need to think about what you think about this person. It's how it makes you feel. People felt something when Michael Bisping fought. It's like, I can't stand that. I can't wait to see him flattened one day. That's a feeling. That's not a thought. That's a feeling. Same with Ronda Rousey, same with Misha Tate, Conor McGregor. They make you feel something. So we've got to find out what it is. And there's the old hat stuff, like they've got a tragedy, in their family, and they're fighting to feed their families and stuff like that. And it doesn't matter how overdone it's been done. It's still, you can still make it fresh if you approach it the right way. If they can just make you emote with them a little bit, because that's the secret. And and again, it's very easy to say, well, this is the goal. To accomplish it is hard. Some they just don't have it, or you fail to see that this wasn't a great story, or you miss something. Oh, so and so is I don't know. They got this they could connect with this audience. I never even thought about that audience was even a cohort group to encourage to buy a UFC pay-per-view or to buy a boxing ticket, So it's way more of an art than it is a science, and it's as easy to get wrong. Even with the best plan, can still just fizzle and what went wrong? You don't really know, but you got to try again.
Who are some of the fighters that have surprised you? Because there's some clear cases, right, where you see someone like McGregor or Bisping talk and you get that they have that charisma, you just automatically know. And some people have stories where you're like, yeah, I know that story is going to sell. But are there any cases where you're like, I don't see that working, and that fighter just gained some sort of surprising popularity or something just clicked with them?
Yeah, I mean, dozens. I mean, no one really sticks out, but anyone who says, yeah, I knew everybody from Conor. I mean, Conor McGregor, I met when he was 18. He was hanging around UFC 93, which is the first UFC event in Dublin, and he was this spotty little nuisance hanging around the hotel lobby. His gym mate Tom Egan was on the card. I think he lost to John Hathaway, I think, really quickly. But the Irish are very passionate about any kind of talent they have, no matter if it's music or, sport. If it's Irish, they are on it. They want to cover it. So we use Tom Egan a lot, and he would bring this gobby little kid with him a lot. And I really liked him in the sense that he was bothering Rich Franklin for his autograph, who was fighting. He was bothering Michael Bisping. He was bothering everybody. He was waiting for Dana to talk to Dana about signing him. I was like, oh God, don't talk to Dana. Thank God Dana's in a different hotel. But I remember him saying, my name's Conor McGregor, remember my fucking name. And I did remember it. And I would have bet my life. I would have bet my life that if he ever made it to the UFC, he wouldn't do very much, because why would he? He was just a fan. He was just a huge, massive, MMA running through his blood fan, and there was 1,000 of them. But I do remember him saying, remember my fucking name. No one could have predicted that. I mean, it had ingredients. A lot of Americans seem to love the Irish. Irish. I'm Irish. It's like, oh, really? You're from Boston. Yeah, I'm Irish. That's bizarre to English people. It's like, well, you're American. You sound American. You probably can't name 3 cities in Ireland. You've never been to Ireland. How are you Irish? But it's part of the DNA of American culture and society. So he had that going for him. He could talk. He had that going for him. He could knock people out. He had that going for him. But even with those great ingredients that any promoter would kill to have all 3 of those in one person, it's no one could have predicted he'd become this. All you can do when you see this happening, this catalyst happening, is you can just throw more fuel on the fire, more fuel, get more exposure for him. That's all you can do. You don't create that. No, the best promoters ever, and I think that's Dana White. Even if he had a cabal of the best promoters in history, couldn't have created Conor McGregor. It either happens or it doesn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, but there's a point where you're putting, more wood on the fire.
Mm-hmm.
You had to have seen where this is a new level. This is explosion. This is like a house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where do things go, and you just like, he keeps winning, and then is it Conor who suddenly becomes this? I love that you talked to him as a fan who wanted autographs. I love that. I'd like to. I wish there was video of that. Show it to him. Did he also evolve as this, notorious and having this, hyper confidence? Did you see that evolve as well?
Yeah, I was kind of stepping away from the PR thing. I was Fight Pass had launched by then when I was heavily involved in that. But Conor has amazing instincts. Again, and this isn't something that anyone can be taught. He has instincts. I mean, at one point, in PR, like I said, the bane of PR is begging, pleading, bullying, relentlessly bombarding a media outlet to cover somebody or something, them saying yes, and then you can't get the fighter to do it, or they don't see the point, or they don't, there's nothing as frustrating. And it's a frustration and a pain and an agony that only PR people, no, it is awful. It is the worst. But Conor, I remember there was an incident where some people thought Conor was doing that. I think what they wanted to do was him and Jose Aldo, they were doing that world tour. They wanted them to go, I don't know if it was in England, Ireland, I can't remember where it was, but the idea was them to be on meet some soccer players and play a little kickabout, maybe see how many of them could kick a ball and keep it in the air for so many repetitions and stuff like that, wear an Irish jersey, a Brazilian jersey. And Conor was like, no, not doing that. And they're like, but this is this or that. And he was like, no. He goes, this guy isn't my friend. I'm not going to have a kickabout on a field with him. I don't care who's there. I'm not his friend. You put him in that close proximity to me for 30 minutes, I'm going to call him every name under the sun. I might even punch him. And he got it. He got it. We were wrong. He was right. Same when he went on Ultimate Fighter, he was like, I'm not wearing that jersey.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not wearing a suit. Conor McGregor, my brand, the Conor McGregor that's on the TV station doesn't wear tank tops. I don't wear wife beater vests. I'll show up wearing a Armani suit, thank you. What, to a gym? Yes, to a gym. He gets it. He knows, he gets it as much as anyone in the history of sports gets it. And again, no one took him aside and said, Conor, so here's how it works. No one did that,
Yeah, no, and it's like it takes a good PR person not to be like, no, this is the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're salt of the earth, and that you're buddies with this guy and wear the jersey. You're a team player.
Yeah.
To get out of the way.
Yeah.
I mean, and then because there were a lot of times people are like, why is UFC? They should be tamping down McGregor. Because his antics definitely.
Yeah.
There's spectrum of the thing. But I can see though it's an art, and I also see that it's also like playing with fire. Like you can't contain something like that because it's bursts, because I also know, like, I think McGregor tweeted out that he was very sorry about Khabib Nurmagomedov's dad being in a car. And I actually know that there's no way anyone could make him do that. That Conor, and he just he controls himself, and and because we were talking earlier about how people were saying he's done the negative press that he was doing with this trash talking, but I think that Conor, he knows the rivalry, but he also knows that this is a moment where you have a real feeling. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, on that, I mean, look, I haven't been around Conor for a long time. I mean, what I was saying earlier about him getting it, I mean, the whole bus incident I thought was appalling. I mean, a lot of people I care very much about were on that bus. So, I think he was very lucky to have some good legal help to make that not blow up in his face more than it did. But yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's any secret that he may have lost whatever the touch he had. He lost it for a little bit. And I think he's trying to regain that now,
Hey, Ant?
Yep.
I got a question on that. Is there a line? Because sometimes, like when you're dealing with PR, when you're dealing with selling a fighter or selling a card, when you have Conor McGregor throwing the trolley, throwing the trolley through the bus, and people are actually getting hurt, and then 3 days later, you've got that video footage being used to promote the fight with Khabib, or you've got someone like Colby Covington saying the kind of shit that Colby Covington says. Is there a line that you guys flirt with in that world where, and are there times when you simply say, this probably would bring in a lot of money because it's controversial and this guy's selling tickets, but we just can't? Like, how much farther can a Colby Covington go with the things he says before someone might say, no, that's not acceptable if he's still selling tickets? Or how many buses can Conor McGregor destroy if it sells a fight? It seems like that's always that line, because it's probably the more controversy generated is going to sell more tickets, right?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, well, I wasn't involved in any of that. I was part of no discussions. I had nothing to do with PR during that. I mean, with the whole UFC using the footage of the bus, I think it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't, because there was footage out before Dana had even had a microphone shoved under his nose about, what do you think of that? If the footage was out there like that, because everybody walks around now with not just a camera but an editing suite in their pocket with a cell phone. So the footage was out there. So if they didn't show it, there'd be anything like UFC is trying to, is hiding footage away and, pretending that this incident did not occur, which would be a fair critique. Instead, they did show it. It's like UFC is using this incident to sell interest in the fight, which is also a valid critique. But the difference is one of them, both of them will generate interest in the fight. And so again, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't in that situation.
And there's something also about, I had personally, I was a little mad at Connor because I was on the train, or I had my tickets to go there, and I was just like, oh, we lost 4 fights. And so we had already lost Ferguson and then Holloway. It was just
it was horrendous.
I know.
Yeah, it was horrendous.
But I mean, I'm used to, like, that's why when a card happens with most of the people, I'm just like blessed,
Mm-hmm.
So I get it. And I can't even imagine what you're thinking, that you've dealt with, like building up these fights, the promotion. And, oh my God.
Yeah. I remember walking out. I can't remember what it was, but we had a ton of work done and for a massive card, and then it changed again. And I was just so despondent, like been up all night for days and days, so despondent. I was like, I'm done, guys. I'll see you tomorrow morning. And I went home at like 2:00 and watched TV. So
good for you, because
yeah,
you're the ones who have to repackage, right?
Yeah.
I was about, because I've been involved. I was also at 209. We lost the Khabib fight, Ferguson fight. My husband was at I think it was 213, where Nunes had to leave, had like a nasal issue that day.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? You have to have is that you direct people, like, you got to make it like this, and that's what.
Yeah. UFC 100 was a bad one, because obviously the biggest fight, the UFC 200, sorry, was the big one, because
that was, they had 3 fights that week, right?
It's changed again, and I was with Michael Bisping, and he was not drunk, not by Bisping standards, but he was definitely tipsy. He goes, I'm going to call Dana White and say I'll fight Daniel Cormier right now. I'm like, okay, I'd like to listen to that. Dana was like, you're drunk. Yeah. So when he was middleweight champion, he wanted to fight Cormier on like 3 days notice, so whatever it was.
I can hear these Bisping stories all the time.
Yeah.
They never get old. So yeah, no, I figured that, gosh, the PR, you guys do. I was saying that sometimes people think that, PR, they're just creating, I wouldn't say puck pieces, but they're just, that's what they're creating. But I realized that you really are integral to getting people to pay attention to a fighter, to learn to care. I love that how you say it's the emotion that you're getting from it. But then I'm also thinking, like, oh my God, you're dealing with the buildup. You're getting, and then, holy cow, you have to deal with the changes. And so, man, your job is never ending.
And look at it. It's not just PR, by the way. That it's this production crew. There's creative people. Every time there's a big change like that, there's essentially 2/3 of the promotion is like, and they've got to start from scratch. So it wasn't just woe is the job of a PR person. It was, it's everybody involved. Everybody involved. But there's definitely, I don't know. This is the part where I could get my big mouth could get me in trouble. But there's definitely let's find out. There's definitely a Twitter mob right now that, since I've no longer can have a tweet attributed to a UFC official said, I've delighted in having to go back at this last 15 months. There's definitely like, PR has nothing to do with journalism. And I'm like, most of the people who say that aren't particularly successful journalists, are they? It's not the Ariel Helwanis or the Josh Rosenblatts or, the people who've got best-selling books out there who are saying that. It's basically, low-rung bloggers. There's always and look, as cool as this stuff is, we're all discussing right now, and as fun as it is, and as great lessons you can learn about, courage and honor and be inspired. As cool as this fight stuff is, it's just a Saturday night pastime. It ain't that important. It's not, researching brain cancer or developing a COVID-19 cure. Okay, so this is how people who cover those important topics operate. So, get off your high horse is what I think about, I've had this story suggested to me, and I also like, a UFC staffer suggested to me, I didn't ask this question. But I've done that. I've done that many times. I've gone to, a Kevin Iole and said, hey, he's in a fucking awful mood. If you lead off with that, he's going to shut down and you're going to get yes, no answers. You're not going to have a story to write. Mm-hmm. Talk about anything but, and then introduce it once he's got talked. And like, thank you. Because no fighter, no athlete, no pop star, no actor owes you a good interview. They may contractually have that they have to do PR. Doesn't mean they have to be talkative. Doesn't mean they owe you a good copy. They don't owe any of that to you. So if you want to go in there like I am a journalist, and I'm Senator McCarthy, you must answer my questions fully and honestly. You'll get yes, no answers, or you'll get them to hang up. You can't go in and bull in the china shop. It's just people with real human feelings. Fighters don't want to be asked about when they were knocked out last time, 3 days before fighting the biggest puncher in the heavyweight division. They seriously want to not think about that. They want to think that was a mistake. It didn't happen. I hadn't trained. The fighters have to tell themselves a whole raft of lies in order to be able to do what they do. They have to shave off bits of reality. Just shove it. It's like cut it off like the tumors. And then part of promoting it is like, but you're fighting this huge puncher, and he did this to Alistair Overeem, or he did this to John Jones, or he did this to Dan. They don't really want to. So you can't go in like a bull in the china shop. You've got to realize that they're not a machine to generate quotes that you can then put on a page. What they are is people, and you've got to engage with them as people. And that's when you've got super talented people like Ariel Helwani, who, no matter the background of person, he can just extract these great interviews from people. And you got people who can't do that and, don't get good quotes. So it's a skill. It's all about, I kind of went on a segue there, but it's all about reading people. So if I said, hey, don't mention that off the bat, you'll get a shitty interview. That is my job, because what I want is that reporter to walk away with a recorder full of good quotes, or a notebook full of good quotes, and for them to go away and write a good story. Very few times have I told a reporter, like, stop asking that. Very few times. You're always on a sticky wicket when you do that. But there's been times where I thought that was completely appropriate.
What about Dana White's relationship with the media? Because I feel like it's a strange thing, because as you're saying, the line between PR and media, it's a mutually beneficial situation. But then you have these situations like just a couple of weeks ago where Dana White was calling, just railing at all MMA journalists. I don't even remember what the story was about, that he was so upset about. It was probably they're going ahead during the coronavirus. But I mean, he was just attacking just all MMA journalists, which seemed like a very strange approach, both in terms of trying to have a relationship with the media and these people being the people that are putting the stories out there, as you know, helping the sport grow, but also just in general, why there would be that sort of contentious attitude with the media, when generally, in my experience, 99% of MMA media is fans first. Like, it's not like they were assigned the UFC beat by their editor. It's like generally fans. So do you ever find that Dana White's attitude, I understand what you're saying about the fighters, but Dana White's attitude, if he gets asked about fighter pay or health insurance or COVID or whatever, to lash out at the media, that there's a bit of a silencing, a chilling effect there? Is that a danger?
Well, I haven't really read much last month or so. I'm on a deadline.
Okay.
So yeah, I believe it or not, I was barely aware that there was going to be a UFC pay-per-view event until it was almost upon us, because I just saw a headline after it's off, it's on, it's off, it's on. So I don't really know what you're talking about, but I mean, I can talk from my own experience as a journalist. I mean,
please.
I've been threatened with. I was threatened by boxing promoters. I was threatened with physical violence. I had someone about to try and perform physical violence on me, and I was also sued. I mean, you might not know, as in the UK we have these draconian laws where it's the. Does everyone know what we're about to say? Because
we all know about Meghan and Harry and like the royals. They have to, like, there's all these things that they can sue the tabloids. Yeah. We know that.
So the broadly speaking, in America, if I write, I don't know, let's pick on Josh. If I say that Josh is, if I write a story that he is, I don't know, what can I say, running a devil cult. You know, his whole career as a writer is some sort of satanic cover for a satanic cult. Josh would have to sue me in America, would have to prove that he's not. He would have to prove that he's not, which it's hard to prove a negative.
Yeah, it is hard to prove a
negative. In the UK, it's the opposite. He would sue me, then I would have to prove. Well, here he is dressed in a red cape with horns on his head, at this satanic ritual, and I would have to prove. It sounds fairer in the UK way. It sounds fairer, I think. You would have to be able to prove. A journalist has to be able to prove, a higher in a court. Would have to be able to. Anything you write, you need to meet a legal burden proof. It sounds fairer. It's actually not. In practice, it is a device and a weapon for people who are rich to bully journalists. That's what it is. So it's very easy to. So I had a promoter, and that's part of the settlement. I was supposed to not to talk about it, but good luck. Suing me now. Now I live in America, but yeah, I mean, I wrote some very very fair stuff, and it was like, this is all negative, and it's basically a way to bully, because as soon as you're filed against, there goes 10 grand, boom. You need to hire a barrister, a solicitor, a lawyer, boom. There goes money, and it's a nuisance value, and that is a chilling effect. So I kind of compare that, and I compare when I had a promoter. Actually, an MMA promoter calling me up. I was lying in bed with my belly full of Christmas dinner one day, and Christmas Day, obviously. And my phone went, and it was somebody threatening to beat me up, and it was a promoter. And I said, well, don't send any of your heavyweights around; they all suck. But when I hung up, I was less brave. I was like, "Oh shit! What if he was? He's taking time off his Christmas break to phone me up and threaten me with violence." So when I hear journalists saying that Dana White gave me a hairy eyebrow and give me the hairdryer treatment, I'm like, really? I've been sued and threatened with physical violence, and you're bitching that Dana's yelled at you a couple of times.
Right.
Oh,
it's a Josh, I think we're hearing birds or something.
Oh yeah, those are the birds.
Those are the birds. Well, do you mind muting a little, because it's we're getting when you're not talking? But thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'll enjoy them by myself.
I thought you were whistling. I thought that's great. Is he chewing gum or whistling? What's he doing?
It's amazing, and I'm jealous because it is a nice day there. So I really want to also get into, and Tanisha, I really want your thoughts, because you've done. Had some ideas on fandom, but also talking about, fear and honor. Let's go back to Conor McGregor.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked, and I'd love for people to come into this debate, that combat sports at one time, or just not even combat sports, maybe it was another thing, because we talked about duels. Honor was something that was at stake in prize fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no longer.
Well, not no longer is there's actually, I knew you were going to ask this, and I should have looked up the book. I am terrible with names. I will email all of you that this book, you absolutely have to read it. It'd be really embarrassing if it was mentioned in Josh's book, which I think it actually was. But on it, I mean, and this came up when I was at the UFC. They were doing these, 7 kind of pillars of our brand, and it was like honor and stuff. And I was like, honor doesn't mean what, or at least isn't supposed to mean what you think it does. Honor, in times gone by, before you had the protection of policemen in the state and lawyers and courts, honor was, all honor meant was everybody else's thoughts of how much vengeance you would enact upon them if they crossed you in business, crossed you by saying your wife is fat, crossed you by besmirching you, saying you're a double dealer, that you don't pay your debts. That's what honor was. And the physical manifestation was that of that honor system was dueling. It's like, you've sent my wife a letter suggesting that you'd be like to meet her again at another party or something like, that's the kind of thing people would duel about. Yeah. You were literally honor bound to defend your honor there, or you were done. You had to then escalate that to a duel. And there was also like some really cool books, and actually I got sort of a documentary on the History Channel maybe a year ago about, you make a big, just like gorillas when they hit their chests like that, or peacocks, make themselves look big and stuff like that. There was this whole kind of subculture of things were happening. As I would challenge, you, Brian, to a duel, and it wouldn't be today, it wouldn't be tomorrow, it wouldn't be Saturday. It would be a sufficient time for somebody from my side, a friend, a family member, to go and meet someone from Brian's camp and say, let's just work this out so they don't have to, draw pistols or draw swords, because I don't really want to go into a 50-50, proposition when I might die, or, either murder someone or die. I don't really want to do that. What I want is him to stop saying I don't pay my debts. That's what really, but with, you couldn't sue people like that back then. So that's what it was. And fighting became prize fighting was a consequence of that. It was, someone would be prideful, like the toughest guy in his town or his city or his suburb. There'd be an adjacent, region, and they are the toughest guy. And for honor, it's like, well, I'm the toughest guy in Boston, like John L. Sullivan. Half the people, John L. Sullivan, the last bare knuckle boxing heavyweight champion, most of the people he fought weren't boxers. They were leg breakers. They were gang members. They were tough guys, and it was on the honor system. That doesn't really exist anymore in society, because of, it's got to the point where you defend your own house, without, here I live in Las Vegas. I read 6 months ago that a caught himself breaking into someone's house and successfully sued them that he got caught. I'm just carrying out my job, getting crazy. But
well, you did say there is an exception, right?
Yes, there is an exception in prison.
Yeah.
In prison, if somebody knocks you out of line or grabs your baguette or whatever, you have to hit them. Is what I've read.
Maybe schoolyards, possibly.
Yes, maybe the schoolyard. Certainly the school I went to.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
I was just made fun of because I had 80s hair, 90s hair. So, but that's girls. We have our own honor system.
Yes.
At that age. So this is why I'm thinking about this, and I'd love Tanisha for you to come in, because I do think that Conor McGregor, he has money. He was a champ. I do think that maybe, why else would he be fighting? He doesn't need money. Is it maybe for the glory or honor?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different type of honor, you know. No one's, you know, no one's bumping into him in Dublin High Street and saying, you know, meet me on in the woods on Saturday, you know, because I say I'm the toughest guy in Dublin, not you. You know, that's not happening. But you know, with guys like that, it's, you know, Conor has a very exact idea of what he wants to accomplish and how he wants to be remembered. You know, I mean, like it, but don't get me, you know, he ain't gonna be fighting for free anytime soon. You know that, you know, with fighters, and this is kind of goes back to what we would, you know, I was saying about how you approach interviewing them. You know, fighters put their very sense of themselves on the line when they fight. You know, it's losing a big fight is like losing your job, failing your dream job interview in front of hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people watching. It is a failure that, you know, we all have some of that in our life, but it ain't public like that.
In your underwear.
They don't have, yeah, in your underwear, stripped to the waist. Yeah. The rest of us in our lives, we don't have to risk that. We don't risk that type of humiliation. These guys, these women do, you know. So that's why I always kind of approach it with that kind of sympathy in mind. You know, it's not just a sporting result that, you know, that the shame of losing is spread amongst a squad or a team. It's just them. It's just them. You know, and I'm always sympathetic when I hear, you know, Dettany Wilder like basically blaming his coach. I'm like, it's such a humbling defeat, you know, for going from knocking everybody out to getting absolutely butchered and knocked out in there, you know, by the guy you've said is a non-puncher. It is such a blow deep down in the soul. It's such a damaging thing to happen to your ego. I'm always sympathetic. I always forgive fighters for saying any kind of nonsense in the immediate aftermath of those type of defeats. Especially
boxers, because you know, coming up with the whole idea of blaming the coach, or then also that it was the armor he was wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Like boxers, it's almost like they're expected to make up these kind of excuses, because then we still have to. It wasn't their ability that was wrong, so that we can have the rematch. It was just there was something else that happened. I think about that because I watched Hagler versus Hearns again, and I tell everyone watch that again. And I read somewhere that Hagler, because someone said that like he had a massage or something, like, or the excuse was, and I was just like, oh my god, that's so boxing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I wrote a story, and I'm embarrassed that I did, but Vladimir Klitschko came out with that his shorts have been drugged.
Okay.
And I let him have it. I just let him have it in this column I wrote, and I regret it. I regret doing that. As ridiculous as that is. I mean, like, drug shorts, you know, sounds like something that Bart Simpson would come out with, you know. But he said it, and he kept saying it. And even his brother, Vitaly, kind of called me up and was like, yeah, you know, we're trying to tell him to stop saying it, but, you know.
Like Wilder and his walkout gear being too heavy.
Yeah. And there might be some truth to that. I mean, he's got some skinny legs. He's got some skinny legs, and that looked like heavy. And getting the fighters to get that mindset, to be able to do that. It's no good if they achieve that mindset the day before, a week before, the day after. It's no good if, you know, I've had fighters say, you know, I've got Chael Sonnen told me he felt great until after breakfast, and then it was like, oh, I need another day. It's not there. So that really could have affected. Well, that could have been, this is bloody heavy. You know, maybe not bloody because he's not English, but, you know, that could have been in his mind. Like, this is heavy. This sucks. My legs are getting tired. Why am I wearing this? That could have been his thought process all the way there, all the way through the first round. You know, so in one sense, he's telling the truth. That because he was distracted. You know, it's such, just to get that mental peak at exactly the right time is the biggest part of fighting. It is the biggest part of being a successful fighter. You know, and dozens of fighters have told me that in their own different ways. And again, that's when, you know, you have the Twitter mobs going after them. I always like, be more sympathetic. You know, I would not, you know, I publish books, I publish stuff with my name on it, but have seen someone saying that sucked on Twitter. It's not nice, but it ain't getting humiliated in literally a cauldron of people with cameras beaming it all around the world. It's different. So if Wilder wants to say that, I don't think he should be torn apart for it. He might actually be telling us something kind of deep, kind of honest. That might have affected him way more than we could even believe.
No, for sure. I think too, like I've just been listening, and there's a lot of fascinating points that, you know, you've talked about and that's been brought up in the conversation. And I don't know, I'll try to kind of full circle all of it in terms of like boxing, MMA, and storytelling, and even honor. But I think brand storytelling in the sports space just can't be, you know, overstated as to how important it is, from like a promotional league standpoint all the way down to maybe even a team camp to the athlete level. And when you were talking about like introverts, right, and being able to like make that human connection so that people will have something as like emotional bait to become invested in the sport and in the athlete.
Yeah,
I know it can be hard too when you're dealing with somebody that's a little bit introverted and not as open to sharing stuff like that. In NBA comparison, I'm thinking of Kawhi Leonard, right? Like he's a very introverted guy, and to the point where they've almost started to market that, and they've called him now the fun guy, because he actually is the opposite, and he's like the awkward guy that has memes now about his awkward laugh and his silly dance, and it's poking fun a little bit, but he's like, yeah, whatever, you know. And so they've been able to, you know, attribute that type of personality, even bringing it out of them. You think they don't have personality, but then they spin that into a way like, no, you're the fun guy now. And he's just like, sure, whatever. Like, I'll show up. Or Marshawn Lynch, and I'm here so I don't get fined. Like, you have those different types of levels, rather. But then I started thinking about too, like, about the brand, the boxing brand, right? And why, or the lack thereof, so to speak. What type of story-driven mind needs to be in the room to convince boxing, or to make that at its peak again, so that you can start to have these type of emotional connections? And it makes me wonder if boxing and MMA can coexist at a high level, because sometimes it seems like when boxing is most popular, or when UFC is like so popular right now, it's like boxing is blocking and UFC is able to take the charge, right, and run for 90. And like there's this ebb and flow of when boxing's super popular, you've got Mayweather, you've got Clarissa Shields, you've got Wilder Fury, and then something else has to pivot. Like, can they both coexist? What needs to happen from like a brand storytelling standpoint of like what's holding boxing back from kind of achieving that level of consistent recognition?
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of big questions in there. Thank you. And I don't have the greatest answers to all of them, but boxing is boxing. The advantage the UFC has over boxing, because again, you're talking about a company which is, you know, let's say it's 80%. It's probably more than that, but UFC is probably 80% of the entire sport. You know, there's many people who just watch UFC, and you couldn't force them at gunpoint to watch any other type of MMA. They want to watch UFC. But the advantage the UFC has developed for itself, you know, is again that brand, and you have with boxing, it's more like the circus comes to town. They have to promote that event, and then there's not really a carry on to the next event. You know, they've recognized, the boxing industry has recognized that. I mean, the Super Six, I think, is a wonderful idea. You know, that is a tournament. You know, it's like it has a start, a middle, and a finish. It has progress. You know, it has a built-in storyline over a period of, you know, it's 18 months to 2 years, however long those last. But at the end of that, you know, when you have an Andre Ward, then Andre Ward goes back into the, you know, you've got to tell the story and tell the story of this fight. Yeah, I mean, you know, they're great when they have rivalries. You know, Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury has a rivalry. You know, they're both British, they're both massive. One is, you know, one, I'm sure they're going to present it that Joshua's had stuff handed to him, you know, and I'm sure they hand Olympic spots out to anyone, but he's had things handed to him, whereas Tyson had to go a wide and crooked path. You know, one was a media darling, wasn't a meat. One was all but ignored. One was born with talent. I mean, I remember seeing Tyson Fury, me, Dan Hardy, and Paul Dale watching Tyson Fury hit the heavy bag, and I remember scoring around for the heavy bag. That's how bad he was. You know, if you had said that this is one of the best boxers of his generation, just in terms of talent, I would have bet in my life that you were wrong. I would literally bet whatever you wanted. I'll give you 2-1, whatever you wanted. It was terrible. And that's been like, I don't, the story I would ask Tyson Stewart is like, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. You know, because most of us, you know, we find something, you know, in our teens or at school that we're good at, and we kind of gravitate towards that because we've got like a natural aptitude. And yeah, we can work hard and develop that talent, but we had something. At some point, it came easier to us than it did the next guy or the next girl sitting next to us. Tyson was just bad at this. He was just, trust me, I've seen Lennox Lewis and Roy Jones, Bernard Hopkins in the gym. This guy was just bad. And to become what he's become, the skill, the head movement, the pivot, I don't understand. I don't, unless he was like, you know, Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, they stuck something in him and they uploaded all these skills. I don't know how he went from that to what he is now. But UFC, yeah, I mean, it does have this, it has this built-in brand. And that is when people say, well, the UFC promotes itself above and beyond the fighters. And I'm like, yeah, and that's to the benefit of the fighters. Mm-hmm. Because there's a built-in storyline always. You're not just traveling to Milwaukee and setting up the Turkish center, and then you won't roll back in next season with a different circus tent and a whole different set of stories. You need to start from scratch. I don't think that I mean, I think I know enough to say it's not accurate to say that MMA, when MMA is doing well, boxing can't, and vice versa. There is more of a crossover in combat sport in journalists who cover both than there are fans that are passionate about both. I mean, there's a bigger crossover between both of those in professional wrestling than, you know, every study I've seen, every, you know, even anecdotal evidence, you know, there isn't that much of a crossover. Same with kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. You know, when the last couple of years at UFC, I was very involved in developing the professional aspect of jiu-jitsu. I think that is the next big thing in combat sport is professional jiu-jitsu. You'd think that there's a massive crossover with UFC audience, and that there isn't. There is a crossover audience, and there's always going to be an aspect of the audience who watch a UFC event who will be interested in maybe trying out watching a show of professional jiu-jitsu, but it's nothing like a sure thing. They're not the same population. So I don't think it's any more true to say boxing and UFC can't be very successful at the same time anymore. It is the same sign for science fiction movies to do well, horror movies have to do bad. You know, I don't see that. I just don't think that's borne out in my experience.
That's so interesting. And Tanisha, you might also have some ideas. I'm so curious, who is an MMA fan, a UFC fan, and how is that different than a boxing fan? I know that's a huge question, but you probably had to, especially, and that's probably evolved. Yeah.
I mean, I can't divulge too much of what I saw when I was in the UFC, but I mean, there was a time it's changed because obviously, you know, UFC's been major part of the sporting landscape now for well over a decade. But there was a time where the way to answer that was like boxing tends to skew much older, and UFC has a younger audience, you know. Well, and I'm old enough to remember when calling someone a tough noob was the worst insult you could possibly throw at a fellow MMA fan, you know. And well, the tough noobs have now, if they're still around, the tough noobs have been around now for like, what, 15, 17 years, 18 years, so then there's also, as UFC developed, we now got like basically the first time now we got second generation UFC fans. Maybe we got fans who like, yeah, my dad used to sit me down to watch Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz, and that's when I became a fan. I became a boxing fan because my dad sat me down, I think to watch Lennox Lewis, who we said was going to be the first British heavyweight champion we've had in 100 years, and for the Rocky films and stuff like that. So, it's ever evolving. It's ever evolving. I mean, obviously, UFC and MMA would kill to have the passionate Mexican American audience that boxing gets. Hasn't quite happened yet, but you're always a star away from reaching these people.
What about gender? Because I always try and find these percentages of, I've seen reports that there are 50% of the UFC audience is female, of the fan or people watching. Is that true, or is that, and obviously I would say, usually I have to source myself because I'm, in academia. I definitely think there are more women MMA fans than boxing fans, because I think boxing has never tried to really grab that viewership. They're doing a little better now with Clarissa Shields, Michaela Mayer, those, actually show box had Clarissa headline finally. Mm-hmm. It's still, I don't like that women have less rounds, but, boxing's already a long endurance sport that may be too long anyway. But, okay, so goodbye, Josh.
Hi, Josh. Good catching up, man.
Yeah, great to see you, Ann. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. See you soon. All right, bye, guys.
It was great. So yeah, what can you tell us about what you guys, the numbers that you guys knew about?
No, because I'm under an NDA. I mean, generally speaking, yeah. Look, I mean, I think what the UFC did with the female fights was exactly exactly right. Almost flawless execution. You don't treat it like a sideshow, like Don King and Bob Arum did with the Mia St. John's and even the Christy Martin, who was a tremendous fighter, like a sideshow act. You don't strongly encourage them to dress in pink. You say, you put your foot down and say, no, we're not going to insist they fight shorter rounds. You don't make the belt smaller, literally physically smaller than you do the male belts. And yes, you start off as you intend to go on. You headline the first female fight is the headliner. Yeah. It's the only championship fight on the card, therefore it's the headliner. Full stop. But yeah, I mean, look, my wife before I met her, was a massive UFC fan. I remember on the first date, she said she didn't like sport, but she liked UFC, and I'm like, but yeah, I think the UFC is almost like a blueprint of how you do introduce female divisions. I mean, even to this day, like, why is tennis? Why do the women? Why does Serena Williams need to play less sets?
Yeah.
Why? It's nonsense.
I see that, women and we've talked about this in MMA. Really the first one to kind of transcend that in terms of the pay wage, seeing what Ronda was making compared to men, and where no other sport, I think now the female soccer players may be getting their equity, but it is interesting. But I think a lot of it is because they were treated the exact same. It was about the athlete up there. When you hear Joe Rogan talk about it, it wasn't this talking anything of their value being about appearance or anything. It was just about their strength.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's always something special this year that you proceed with a degree of caution. I remember we were promoting it. We added Invicta to Fight Pass, and the first show was headlined by Michelle Watson. And as soon as I spoke to her on the phone, I was like, oh my God, she's a star. Oh my God, I can't wait to, I flew her out to Vegas like literally the next week to meet with media and promote the heck out of her. I knew she was going to be a massive star. But I remember one of my female colleagues kind of like, hey, this is our fan. You can't call her the karate hottie. I'm like, I'm not. She calls herself the karate hottie. And Michelle's got, I leaned into that. I thought this is a Ben Folks story. This is the kind of story that Ben Folks, if you follow, Ben's writing, he's at The Athletic now. I think the time he was at, God, it might have been so long ago he was at SB Nation. But anyway, I knew this was a Ben Folks story. And I was like, here's a woman who's using, her attractiveness as part of her career, but she's a real fighter too. Why don't you, the pitch was like, why don't you talk to Bang On about how she threads that needle between being taken seriously and, using what God gave her. And then I asked, Ben was like intrigued, and I could tell like he was almost spicy. And I said, and I'll get a husband who actually gave up his fighting career because it was obvious that she was the fighting talent of the family. He took a step back and, became not quite a full-time dad, but, certainly stepped up his dad duties to allow Michelle to train and focus fully on being a professional athlete. Speak to them both. Ask them questions like, karate hot. Your wife's called the karate hottie, and she's got this. You can Google a million images, and people have like the top 10 karate hottie, pictures of the sexes. How was that like for a dude, especially a dude who's took a step back? That's an interesting story. So you're always, of course, you'd rather have attractive people on TV than not. I remember when Luke Rockhold for Chris Weidman, my wife was like, "Oh my God, this is going to be like a porno," and she's a UFC fan. She's like, "That's the two best looking guys in the UFC are fighting. Oh my God, don't hit him in the face." You'd rather have people who are attractive, and attraction comes in a variety of ways. It could just be charisma, just be like super charismatic. You'd rather have them. That makes a lot of things easier than not. But there's also really good looking dudes and really good looking women who, for some reason, just didn't become stars. It's that weird cocktail that no one. All you know is that this works or it doesn't work. So yeah, on the whole, I think the UFC's done an amazing job of introducing, as soon as there were enough female fighters of a standard, and that was always Dana's big thing. I think he went to a show and there was a really talented female fighter, and then there was no one for a fight, so she was just butchering these women, just butchering them. And that was the career of like Mia St. John and even Christy Martin early on. There was no one for them to fight. They were fighting, they'd had sort of like 20 fights and been training for 7 years, and they were fighting people who'd been training for 6 months because there weren't enough people for them to fight. And that was Dana's like, there isn't enough, that you got one or two women who are just going to annihilate everybody. I don't want to see it.
Yeah, you got to grow.
Yeah.
oh my God, we're almost going to be 2 hours. This has been amazing. I have 2 more questions.
Uh-huh.
I want everyone here, Kyle, Tanisha, Atticus, do you have anything, I mean, I have so many more too. We didn't even get to fear, and, because I think that's a whole, carnal of philosophy of fighter not being able to show it. And, what is the cost of that? Because they have to feel it, as you've said.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, Nancy, to piggyback on that concept, when you were talking about honor and fear earlier a little bit, it made me think of this book I read. It's by this philosopher, and it's called The Denial of Death. And it's by Ernest Beckner. And he was saying that, we have 2 versions of ourselves, right? You have our physical self, the one that bleeds, pisses, and shits, all snot, all that. That's our physical self. But then we have our conceptual selves. And that's kind of what our values are, our ideals, that honor, that fear, that's that's conceptual self. And where ego comes into play is because we're so afraid of dying, that our physical self leaving and being buried, that we will use by any means necessary to make sure that our conceptual self lives on beyond our physical, right? Like that's why we get streets named after us. That's why folks will say they want to die on their shield, because they want that idea of themselves to live far and beyond our physical self. And it made me think about that a little bit over the fights the last couple of days, you know, at least because of the stoppages and where, or lack thereof, in terms of how delayed they were in being made. But that conceptual self was like my idea, my brand, whatever ideal we have of ourselves. Because let's face it, like that's what every war started over, right? Like politically, socially, all of this stuff, it's an ego-driven thing, because that conceptual identity that fighters will have, or politicians will have, or society will have, we want that to be so prominent and to live beyond our physical self that we'll do anything to do it. And so in fighting, it's like, okay, like we're willing to tell our corner, no, don't throw in the towel. No, I'm good. Here, ref, have some teeth. That we'll rather have that, so that our legacy of the lion heart, or I'm the strongest, the most stubborn, the notorious, the whatever. It just made me think about that. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, and look, I think you're spot on. I've never heard it quite expressed like that, so thank you. But yeah, I mean, I said, like, when I said that they put on the line the very sense of the self, you know, that is their conceptual self. You know,
that's our brand. What we
exactly. Yeah, it's that idealized self of who they think they are, and they're putting that all on the line. I mean, look at, you know, like you saw the fight on Saturday. You know, Tony Ferguson. There came a point where he had enough, and I saw, and this I get irate when I see this, and I sent a couple of people a DM, like just eviscerating them. But people say he quit. And I hate that. It is not just sympathetic. I always think it's almost inhuman. It's like when you read, you know, obituaries of people like, you know, she lost her battle to cancer after 20 years. I was like, how is that a loss?
Yeah.
She beat cancer for 2 decades straight. How is that losing? That is not losing. That is the very definition of winning. What are you talking about? I hate that is the default. Tony Ferguson, when he got his, I mean, I call it, I mean, my Twitter feed, I was like, I think his cheekbones collapsed. I saw it, you know, I saw how deep Justin's fist went in. Yeah, you can see it. Actually, Jacob Stitch, Duran's daughter, tweeted it as well. But there comes a point where they stop being that fighter, and you think, you know what, I'm not ready to die, and nor should be. Winning the interim UFC title is not worth you dying. You know, my $60 does not entitle me to see that. I don't want to see that, you know? And that's why you know, I write my blog on fear and courage. I think we're so inarticulate the way we talk about it in combat sport. And for me, the chance to see fear overcome, it is the most compelling thing about combat sport. For me, it's the whole thing. If you didn't see that, you know, you just have unconstituted, you know, violence people. Yes, I love seeing a nice crisp jab or a great judo throw. I love to see a Ghostbuster suplex turned into an armbar midair. Marvel at these, you know, these athletic feats. But really, the appeal is seeing people confront physical fear. My little boy, he's actually taught by Roxanne Madaferi, my 6-year-old, and you know, he came to me once, goes like, Dad, I'm afraid of that kid. I'm afraid of that kid. I was like, it's okay. You can't be brave unless you're afraid. If you're not afraid, what is there to be brave about? There's another word for that, and there's a psychological word for it. It's called fearlessness, and about 1% of everyday people doesn't experience fear. You might be one of them. Doesn't experience fear like the rest of us do. They don't get sweaty palms. They don't get that horrible butterfly feeling in their stomach. But we're so inarticulate in combat sports. Everybody from the commentators to the writers, to the fighters, to even to the promoters. You know, we need to. To me, it's fascinating. I've always found it fascinating. You know, the crazy thing is once I started asking people I'm pretty close to, like Michael Bisping, Chael Sonnen, to talk about it, they couldn't shut up about it. You know, because this is a huge part of combat sports. They don't get to, and look, I'm very studiously only asked people like Chael, Mike, Rashard Evans, Forrest Griffin, who weren't going to do this again. So they could talk more freely. Otherwise, you're going to have this wall. They're not going to want to, and nor should they, because they do have to make this idealized self kind of image to take to who walks them to the ring. But they're all happy to talk about it. I mean, fear does some very important things for us to survive. You know, I mean, everyone's familiar for adrenaline, but also releases a chemical to clot the blood. It's almost like the mind knows that lacerations are probably a possibility here. So we better clot them fast. It also transforms, you know, the butterflies in the stomach. That is literally the digestive system just being switched off, like you switch off a light, because it takes a huge amount of energy to extract energy from food. That's a big process, and it takes a lot of energy to get more energy out. So the body's like, don't need it, gone. The same with fighters who say, I hit him after the bell, I didn't hear the bell. And you're like, dude, I was in the 50th row and I heard it. What are you talking about? You lie, you cheat. No. There's psychologists have identified that there's a phenomenon called perceptual Touran, that if you're experiencing danger, it will eliminate the senses that are no longer helpful. So usually the sense of smell is just switched off. That is a percentage of attention that is not going to help you. You know, you're not going to smell a crocodile. You're not going to smell a shark. You're not going to smell a bow and arrow from a rival tribe. You're not going to smell Michael Bisping's knee coming towards you. So it switch it off, but it also can switch off your hearing. You know, if Anderson Silva's fighting me, I don't need to hear him. I just need to see. I just need to see, and I need to see like microseconds worth of movement. So it will literally switch their hearing off. So they can't hear their corner, and they can't hear the bell, and they can't hear the horn. So all these things, I sort of like just weren't being discussed. And the incredibly frustrating thing was we've developed, and it's more in MMA than boxing. In boxing, right? Excuse me, I'm a bit dry mouth. I'm yapping so much. The boxing writers are way more brave, if I can use the pun, to talk about this type of stuff than MMA reporters are. And I think it might have something to do with the tapping out, that they are literally quitting. Whereas in boxing, quitting, you know, is like the end of a boxer's career. Remember, Vitaly Klitschko tore his rotator cuff and needed surgery that night to save the use of his arm. He was called Klitschko for the rest of his career. The rest of his career, crazy. But,
no mas. Roberto Duran.
Yeah, Roberto Duran. Remember as no mas.
Yeah.
And that is because he couldn't win, and he was getting humiliated.
Yeah.
And you know, never lived it down. It's just insanity. But in MMA, it's almost, we don't do that. What we do instead is we won't say brave and courageous. We use these kind of tacky, weak, watered down, diluted terms like gritty. I heard like Thiago Santos had a gritty display against John Jones. I'm like, you mean when he fought with both knees fucked against the best fighter ever, that was gritty? That was gutsy? What are you talking? How about that was unbelievably courageous? That was astonishingly brave. But we don't use that. It's like almost like the virtue that dare not speak its name in MMA. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna write about this now. I've got the time. You know, so, and I've asked like, you know, Chad Dundas and Ben Folks, even Ariel Hawani's like, why'd you use these silly terms? And at first they'll say, oh, well, you know, you don't want to keep using the word brave over and over. You know, you got to show the expanded vocabulary. I'm like, okay, well, I've Googled your name and courage, and not one hit.
And finally, you know, all of them, to their credit, were like, "Yeah, you're probably right." You know, you watch a tennis game, and you'll hear about, "Oh, what a courageous performance by Serena Williams, going, you know, 2 sets down." I was like, the ability to play tennis at a high level and to keep your concentration even when you're losing is many great things. What it is not is brave. They're not firing cannonballs at you or grenades. They're firing tennis balls at you. It's not brave. You know, to see bravery, you really got to go to combat sports. But the crazy thing is, I don't think we talk about it anywhere near as much or as accurately as we should.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I'm pretty sure that Ferguson was not called brave, nor Smith.
No.
You know, I'm trying to think that. Yeah, no, and I'd love to know if anyone, Kyle or Tanisha or Atticus, why can't we say fighters are brave?
I mean, I don't think there's an answer to it, right? And I'm wondering if the promotion can. Do you think the promotion can do something to facilitate this change in the culture? Because one of the things I've been interested in is the discrepancy between how people who train or people who have had fights talk about fighters who lose versus people who are just fans. So fighters, I find, or people who train, are much more sympathetic to the person having to tap out when they're hurt. The fans who get the story from the top down, they're the ones who say, "Oh, he gave up," right? You don't hear someone in the gym who trains saying that any of the fighters we've seen, they didn't give up, right? They know how difficult it is. So do you think it's partially the promotion's role? Job is the wrong word, but can the promotion facilitate that change to make people more accepting when St. Pierre taps out because he's on the verge of being knocked out? Or, I mean, I don't see it happening without the promotion leading the way.
Yeah, I mean, that you're probably right. I mean, look, I don't know if you've seen the documentary Free Solo. Yeah. So there's a part where they gave him a brain scan, and they find out his amygdala is smaller than average, significantly smaller, and that is essentially the amygdala. From Irene, having to speak to people who've studied, the brain for years and years, that is essentially the alarm bell for fear. That is the one that triggers the fight or flight response in humans. It is almost precognitive. It's not just it just boom. It doesn't matter if it's an interview, a job interview, or a first date with a girl you wanted to ask out for a year, or a fist fight with Forrest Griffin. The amygdala triggers your fight or flight response. This is why that's why some people are very anxious. It's very, very bad for you physiologically, because you're in this fight or flight state all the time. I mean, look, I think when I saw that documentary, I thought that would be cool to do brain scans on 100 MMA fighters and see if they've got smaller amygdalas than the rest of us. But that would be interesting. The only thing is it's the UFC's job first and foremost to sell tickets, to sell pay-per-views, to sell hats, to sell T-shirts. And if it doesn't do that, not often do they do charity work, and they do this and that. The UFC Hall of Fame, and they do sell tickets, but they give the money away to charity. The UFC is always, by its nature, is almost like a great white shark. It has to have forward motion, or it ceases to exist. They're not selling tickets to UFC 200 anymore. They'll never sell another ticket to UFC 100 ever again. So there's no point going on about it. And it's the same with this. If it doesn't help promote the next fight or the fight after that, it's not a priority. But I think there's a tremendous documentary there that someone should do.
That person's not you.
Well, yeah, I would certainly be interested in doing that.
Media psychologist right there.
Yeah, there's a heavy role in, I think, encouraging people to be educated about the culture of combat sports. I mean, because unfortunately, not everybody has been punched in the face once or twice, right? Like, more people should, I think, be punched in the face, because then they'd probably have a better perspective, or would be less quick on the draw of calling somebody else a punk, or a quitter or something. Just more people aren't checked. right?
Yeah,
And
I
they can
agree.
say that because they've never been punched in the face when they probably should have, or they've never been checked before, and they've, haven't been in that type of situation, so they're uninformed when they're saying something as uneducated and stupid, as calling somebody else that steps into a cage with the doors locked behind them, a pussy or something.
Yeah.
But I think there is, from a brand perspective of like, okay, UFC, that promise is to produce quality, high production value fights that you're going to want to see. And if there's an entire card of names that you're not going to recognize, you will know them and learn them after the fact because of the performance and the elements that you're giving from them, right? Like Sherman yesterday with his whole 10-piece of wings thing, I was like, done, fan for life. Like, I love this dude. Like, I'm all in now. But there can be something that they do from a storytelling perspective, I think, in all these different spaces, of traditional media to everything going down the shoulder programming list of social media, to helping educate others about the culture and what that means and what is it like. I've been seeing a lot more about that, and the efforts in doing that. I think the reality show is huge, obviously, in doing that, and that makes a mainstream, bring in so many new eyes now to become educated about that space. Like, oh shit, I didn't know that. What? And all the different facets of it. That's why it's called mixed martial arts, right? You have taekwondo, and kickboxing, you have everything in there. So, but the world is too big and we have too many people, and you're never going to be able to have a uniform understanding of the art and athleticism and courage that it takes to be a professional fighter.
Yeah.
Just what can we do to, to just try and weed it out a little bit, or focus on, those that need or that warrant the attention.
It has been fascinating to see how many current fighters have been willing to talk about fear recently, because you've been talking about these great conversations you're having with people like Forrest Griffin or Bisping or Chael Sonnen, who are no longer fighting. But there was an ESPN piece that had Darren Till talking about it, Donald Cerrone. I think Wonder Boy was also in that piece. And so these are people actually currently moving forward, still willing to reflect. Frank Mir has had these long talks about this also, just about the horror that goes into getting yourself ready to make that walk on that day. And so that's a really interesting behind the scenes peek at people are still competing and willing to acknowledge the fear and still move forward.
Yeah, I was so proud of Darren when he, literally an hour removed from, it was like last November when he fought at Madison Square Garden, when he said I was basically breaking my pants. I was going to make up an excuse, I mean, I've heard people like Chael Sonnen said he would fantasize about coming up with the craziest excuses. I mean, he was literally staring at a fire alarm for 20 minutes thinking, if I just hit that, the sprinklers are going to hit and there's going to be alarm and they're going to evacuate and I won't have to fight. And I don't even have to come up with an excuse. I just go press that, and then he's looked at it and in his mind, he was going to do it. It was like, not only did he have this idea, he was going to do it. He was just waiting for the right moment to do it. And then Chael, time, he got up, put his mouthpiece in and went and fought. But for 20 minutes, he was not fighting. Like there was no reality, no possible universe that he was going to fight that night. He was going to hit that alarm, and then he didn't. And for me, it makes fighting more interesting, more intriguing. It makes very few of us have to go through these type of situations in life. The people
I think there's something really compelling, the idea that you can capture that in PR and actually sell that to people more. You don't have to sell someone who's superhuman, right? Like I want to watch Darren Till overcome that and then be superhuman in the cage.
Yes.
More than thinking backstage, he's just this person who doesn't care and just wants to kill someone.
Yeah.
Like, and I think the smart promotions know that, and we're just starting to see that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's a way of articulating. I mean, that's why HBO back in the day was taking cameras backstage and showing people getting their hands wrapped and focus on the face. Yeah. It was unsaid, but we knew we were looking at a guy going to a virtual gallows. And it's like, shit. What if that was me? What if that was me? How would I feel? It's just a way of articulating it. And now I think we've got MRI scans available, and the science of courage has apparently gone through a huge explosion in the last 20 years. It was virtually unstudied. as a piece of psychology, as an avenue of psychology for years and years. Apparently all that changed about 20 years ago. The first book, and I'm terrible with names, but the first real psychological textbook on courage had one chapter on courage and the rest was about fear. That's how little research had been done to that point. But apparently that has all changed now. But we do have all these cool, ways to, let's rig fighters up to a heart rate monitor while they're getting their hands. Are their hearts elevated? Who's nervous? Who's not nervous? Yeah. And does it make a difference in the fight? Is the one who was more nervous, was that person win? Because like Forrest Griffin told me the story, like when he fought Rampage, the hardest puncher probably he'd faced maybe in his career. This is Rampage at the peak of his powers, challenging Rampage for the title. He all day he was like, "Where's my nerves? Where's my butterflies? Where's my nerves?" He got to the arena, "Where's my nerves? Where's that side order of adrenaline I've ordered? Where is it? Where is it?" He gets to the first round, he's fighting Rampage and still like relaxed, and then Rampage catches him, decks him. He's like, "Oh, there's the adrenaline I ordered. Thank you, thank God. Now I can got a chance of beating this guy." So it's maybe it could be just Matt. Maybe maybe I'm just a minority who finds this aspect of it fascinating. But I think it informs so much. I mean, one of the critiques, again from the lazy Twitter mob and the lazy bloggers, is UFC just wants people to shit talk. And I was like, well, you can make that argument if you want. It's not a particularly good one. It doesn't have a lot of merit, I don't think. But why shouldn't Michael Bisping use his wit to dismantle the idealized self, to use a term I learned very recently? Why shouldn't he use his wit to dismantle somebody else's confidence in himself? That is a weapon. It is a fight. That is a weapon he has. Why shouldn't he use it? Why should he pretend that he's friendly? Why should he do that? Why shouldn't he? I mean, when he fought Anderson Silva, he hit him with the drug thing. The main excuse, it was just the Thai sex pill. He's like, "Did you get an erection then? Did you get an erection?" He hit him with a cheat. And when we were writing the book together, I was like, "Why did you do that? You already got the fight. It was already sold out." He goes, "If I fought Anderson Silva, greatest fighter of all time, the guy I'd watched as a fan, the guy that I would always stay up when I lived in England until 6 a.m. to watch live, couldn't possibly watch it on VOD. If I fought that guy, I would lose. So I had to diminish him in my own mind. I had to, even though I knew I was tricking myself, I could play along with the trick enough to diminish him. He's just a cheat. He's not that good. He had steroids in the system. He's just a cheat. He's beneath contempt. Got no respect for him. Zero respect. He's nothing. He had to just do that to himself in order to fight the fight that he did. And that's one of the things that Anderson Silva, he did all that bowing shit and and all that respect stuff. And Chael nailed it. It's like, Brazil doesn't come from a bowing culture. He's not Japanese. He comes from Brazil and not a particularly great part of Brazil either. He doesn't have a bowing culture. All that bowing stuff was to get trick fighters into not being aggressive, to playing his game. And if you play that at the pace that Anderson Silva wants you to fight at, swapping shots, swapping cool kicks, you will never ever win. Never ever. And he spent his career tricking people into that. And the bowing and the faux respect was all part of the psychological trap he played on people. The same when he backed, Anderson would back against the cage, put his back against the cage and do that stuff and do that stuff. But think about it for a second. When you're squared up like that, you can move further than when you're like this. Then I can't really move that far. We all know this. So what he's doing is he's making it hard. He's making it so he can't hit you very hard because he's squared up, but you can't hit him. And he's encouraging you to make a fool of yourself, which will diminish your belief that you can win. People will be laughing. People will be hooting. It's a trap. So what did Michael do when he did that? He stepped back and goes like that and put his hands on his hips until everybody booed Anderson and he had to fight. He's like, I'm not playing this game. It's just like walking past it. It was impossible to win carnival games, like $5 and just get 2 darts in. It's like, but the distance is way more on the dartboard, and the angle's wrong, and it's impossible. And Anderson would set these traps. It's all part of the psychological traps that he would set for people.
This is so great. I mean, Ant, can you come back? Because I know we're getting long, but
yeah, sure.
We're now part of our, I don't want to call us fight nerds. We are, we talk about different aspects of the sport here, but I want to ask you just couple more questions. And then Atticus, do you have anything you want to ask?
Just two things. One really quick.
I have to bail. I just want to say thank you for the conversation. It's been awesome. I'll return for the next one for sure.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to just duck down here, and I've noticed my computer isn't plugged in, so I better plug it.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Be in touch.
I don't know how familiar you all are with like Thai Muay Thai, but in traditional Thai scoring.
Yep.
Tanisha, when you were talking about when both of you were talking about how fighters view themselves and how they kind of have to fit the narrative they build for themselves. And that's just a very internal thing. But in traditional Thai scoring, a lot of fighters are actually kind of shoved into an archetype. Like they're kickers, they're clinch fighters, they're boxers. There are, and then there are a ton of different kind of sub archetypes too. But and the scoring is actually somewhat based on how well they're able to sell that narrative. And Thai scoring is a whole nightmare, but I just think that's a really interesting external manifestation of those internal feelings that it seems like fighters have.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware of all that, so thank you. I mean, I did sign when I was head of content for live content for Fight Pass. I did sign a whole ton of authentic Thai boxing to Fight Pass. I mean, because it was cool and it was reasonably cheap. It's from Thailand, the dollar goes a very long way there. But I know enough to know that I don't know nearly enough. I was the whole thing they do there of the injection, which is something USADA should be worried about. And I'm like, no, what it would be like if we're all sitting at ringside and our fight that because it's all about betting nowadays. It's a betting culture, betting sport. What they can do is oh, guy's getting his butt kicked. How much money you got on you? Nancy, how much money you got on you? Give me. We could go to his corner and go, here's a wad of money, make him go berserk the next round. That's an injection. So they would just charge out and, not necessarily windmilling in outside of a British nightclub at 2 a.m., but you know what I mean? They would go nuts, and that's perfectly kosher. That's part of the culture, So I'm aware that it's got a fascinating subculture in the sport that's existed pretty much unchanged in 400, 700 years, depending on where you pick up the history from. But no, I wasn't aware of much of what you just said, so thank you.
Also, I'm just wondering, I feel like fear is clearly a huge part, as we talked about. I also wonder what role burnout, especially for champions, plays. I know that Robert Whitaker recently opened up about dealing with anxiety and depression and how he just didn't feel present. I know GSP has talked about that.
Yeah.
So kind of as someone involved in the UFC, and then especially as someone in PR, how does that impact things?
I mean, it did. I mean, when we Bisping were writing the book, I mean, there was a infamous fight with Jorge Rivera, which was controversial twice over because Mike scored an illegal knee and then he gobbed a loogie towards the cornerman. But and that was one of the parts of the whole process where we had the most arguments, because I was there. The rule was it's Mike's story told by Mike. I'm just merely facilitating, saying, well, we should probably chop and change that. There's a better way of saying what do you really mean when you're saying this? And that's the job of a ghostwriter. You're supposed to be a ghostwriter, not a poltergeist. You're not supposed to be no one's supposed to be aware that you're in the room. You're a ghostwriter. But for that, I mean, he was burned out. He was burned out. He not necessarily fighting, because he was always excited to be fighting, but what I did is he mentioned one night that he was burnt out going into that fight. And so what I did is I looked at how many weeks, because I knew his average training count was 7-8 weeks. I worked out how many weeks out the previous year he would have been in the same gym with the same people, doing the same stuff over and over and over. And it was something like 9 months of the previous year. So of course he's burned out. It ain't that fun, doing the same drills and the same shot. It's boring. It's boring, and getting up and that, and eating the bland food, and not being able to do this, and it ain't much fun. And then he was expecting like a Rich Franklin, I don't know who was the top, I can't remember who was the top 5. Then Chael Sonnen, I think, he was expecting a fight like that, and it was Jorge Rivera, who was 3-3 in his last 6, and he was like, oh. And I insist to this day, it's not in the book or anything like it, because again, it was Michael's story. He had a power of veto, and this isn't journalism. It's his story told as well as we could tell it. He insists that he trained hard. I insist that he didn't. But I wasn't up with him at 6 a.m. doing his runs. What I did see though is he would have a sausage. I mean, it's probably the egotism of a writer. I wrote this cool little part where he was eating this sausage roll, about 3 weeks out before the fight, and I wrote that the grease had soaked through the paper, and it was just beautiful, horrendous, sticky prose. And I had to cut it out because he insists that he trained hard. Now, I will go to my grave thinking until Jorge Rivera started doing all those videos and making fun of Mike's accent and making fun of his wife and all stuff like that. Until Jorge did all that, he was going to fight a not fully switched on version of Michael Bisping. The second he did that, that was all Michael needs. Michael needs a needle. He needs an enemy. This is competition and stuff like that, and he wants to win the competition and compete. But Michael needs an enemy to motivate him, and once he does that, he's almost unstoppable. And this is why he would create enemies in his mind, and that's why it's so simplistic when people say, "Oh yeah, he's just a shit talker. It's just manufactured." He doesn't really believe that. Well, how does that work in real life? At the time he was saying it, he believed it, and then when the fight's over, there's no reason to be the enemy of that guy anymore. So of course it's gone. It's like there's a time all of us love somebody than maybe the person we actually married. Doesn't mean we were lying at the time. It was just that's what we were going through at the weird analogy maybe, but Mike needed that sense of needle, that sense of adversity that he was being put upon. He was being bullied. That he'd been besmirched. They were talking crap. They were going to take stuff away from him. He needed to villainize these people, and other fighters don't. Other fighters don't need it at all, But and it's whatever works for them. It's no more legitimate or illegitimate a way to motivate. They've all got to. They say 90% of the mental preparation to getting into the octagon or getting to ring is lying to yourself about something. Yeah, I know this guy knocks everybody out, but he won't knock me out, even though I just got knocked out a year ago. Yeah, I'm 42 years old, but I'm as fit as ever. Oh, you're the one human in history who's accomplished that. Congratulate. They don't really believe that, but they tell themselves the lie enough that they believe a part of it. They have to. Or otherwise, it's like you're going to get locked in a cage with a guy who's been training just to hurt you more for weeks and months. They're not going to think that. They have to think, I'm unbeatable. I'm going to be able to take his punch. The fight is over when I get him down. Well, you got so-and-so down who's not a black belt and you didn't tap him. It's not about reality. It's literally about telling themselves lies.
Yeah. Atticus, that's a great question. Everyone's been doing, Tanisha, everyone else who left the conversation. Because I'm thinking about Ferguson here. He had been training since November.
Yeah.
Training. The fight gets moved back. We lose you said, Khabib, obviously they had, hope that was something that he wanted to make that fight and he wanted to conquer Khabib, right? I mean, that rivalry gone on so long. So it makes sense that you bring in someone else who has a different fighting style.
Mm-hmm.
You do a weight cut for no reason, and then another, so it makes sense that Ferguson, even though I hate to take away from Gaethje when we talk about, and Ferguson was courage. I mean, I don't even think all he did was shake his head at the end, like he was clearing the stars away. I mean, like I think did not do anything really, as much as I mean, I'm thinking of other people in that realm. I would have been, running away like time. But I wanted to tell you that you mentioned Ben Folks. We had Dan Stoop come to our class. He was editor, and I'm sure you know him. What they did, they took that pause in, I guess, March, April, to do this massive quantitative and qualitative research of fighters.
Yes.
You know about this because I'm fascinated.
Yeah.
He said he gave us some like first top line things that they learned. A third of fighters throw up before every fight. We talk about that. That's obviously not on the embedded or the way, but it just shows you there's a lot to this fight that they're. I hope that like having this report, and I love data. So now it's gonna give me something, but I'm glad that I'm glad we have places like The Athletic who are maybe they're gonna be the ones to kind of cover these aspects, having long form like yourself, instead of that. I know material is also made to be consumed very easily in these quick bites, but there are people like me, Tanisha, Atticus, who we appreciate that long form, like so I think we're almost at 2.5 hours. I'm like, this is the Joe Rogan.
The Joe Rogan podcast without the bro science.
Yeah, no, we try and get the science here. We have the PhD.
Real science, not bro science.
Real science. So yeah, can you tell us, Tanisha, we'll have to tell where people can find you, Tanisha?
Yeah, my website, TanishaSingleton.com, on Twitter as @TSingletonSays. Got some proposals out for my own book right now that I've been working on, some stuff based on data from my dissertation that I did on digital disruption and fandom in sports. So hopefully that stuff will come out soon. But for now, yeah, I just live tweet obnoxiously on Twitter at @TSingleton.
That's what it's for.
That is what it's for. It's that digital sports bar, So yeah, that's where you find me.
Tanisha, there are two things I want to tell you. One, that Ann Evans used to report for, was it Pro Wrestling Magazine? What was it called again?
Oh, Power Slam Magazine back in the day.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think I have some in my garage still. Like in these times.
Me too.
I have tons and tons.
So if we had to come back, we didn't even get into pro wrestling. So
yeah.
But she's moving to Vegas. She'll be a neighbor.
Oh,
like 2 weeks. I picked like the best, most.
Well, I would take you out to a bar, but I'm not speaking to anyone who's come off a plane, and the bars are shut.
3-hour drive.
But maybe when the world gets back online, we can meet up.
Please, yeah. When we can go outside again, just 3 hours from where I am. But yeah, I'm excited.
Well, best of luck with the heat.
Thank you.
And then before I get to you, Atticus, do you have anything you're doing now you want to talk about?
Not really.
Not really?
Yeah, like I need to find something to do.
You know what?
I'm hiking a lot, but that's really all there is to do.
We all are, boy. Don't worry about it. There's a reason we've all been talking on the internet for 2.5 hours. It's like, there's nothing for humans to do right now.
One of us.
I feel bad.
You are a needed member of these discussions. So thank you. And because we don't even know if we're in DC, which I don't know if you guys know. We are now shelter and stay until June 8th. So this is our world. So I don't know. You guys might be opening up, and I'll just be very jealous. But
Yeah, LA got 3 more months of stay-at-home orders. But yeah, me headed to Vegas. I don't know. I'll find out what the hell they're doing. I don't know yet.
No.
You could
whatever you do, whatever the mayor says. The general rule is do the opposite.
Yes, do that. All right. So, Ant, tell us what where they can get the Ultimate Insider. Can you give everyone that?
My Twitter is @AntEvansMMA. There's a link on there to my free newsletter, Substack. And if you haven't, check out Michael Bisping, Quitters Never Win, available online on download, audiobook. Apparently people don't read books anymore, they listen to them. I did not know this. They wanted Michael to do it. And I was like, I best to look getting it with his schedule. I was pushing for something like Patrick Stewart. I think like, Michael's shit talking with a Patrick Stewart type voice would just be a scream. But apparently I was literally the only person on the call who thought that would be funny. But I don't know. They got someone with a very Manchester accent to say all the, insulting things that are in there.
There's so much more to cover. I'm looking at my questions I sent you. I think we got to 2 of them. So yes, please join us. We love.
Oh, this is a lot of fun. I love talking about myself. I'll come back anytime.
I've learned so much, and what you've told me too is that we need people in public relations in these conversations, because if we're going to talk about the machine of mixed martial arts, of combat sports, you can't only hear one side of it. So I would love to talk to more people in PR, because it's, we are kind of talking about these philosophical kind of questions, but I think we got to understand where people are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should probably close by. I did mention, and then I got just rambled on different direction. But the one time I did tell a journalist to zip it was on a UFC Hall of Fame conference call. We were announcing this debate, an argument, even a fist fight with anyone who criticized it. But we had Jeff Black and his widow, who was terribly nervous about being on call, like just nervous beyond belief to be on there. And old timers who hadn't done an interview in a long time. I can't remember who was on. Like maybe it was someone like Pete Williams, who hadn't done an interview in years and years. Jeff Blacknick's wife, who has probably forgotten what the initials UFC stand for, but she's there to talk about her late husband's being honored. And I had this numpty asking about Fallon Fox and Reebok, so I just told this guy to zip it. I was like, they've got you accepted an invitation to the UFC Hall of Fame conference call. Not the Reebok conference call, not the Fallon Fox conference call. They've got no idea what you're talking about, no idea what you're asking about. Stop, zip it. And that was the one time I told a member of the media to put a pie in the hole.
I understand you're saying there's time and place, but I also think there's a reason that it's okay that you guys don't have to agree all the time and be combative. Mm-hmm. I think that pushing each other is sometimes a good relationship that but I think acknowledging, that everyone has a role.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the difference between good PR and bad PR. I mean, I've had conversations like, that was really unfair. That was really unfair. And here's why. And I've had those conversations with Ben Folks or Hawani, what you don't want is them to say, well, we reached out to you and asked for a comment and you didn't get back to me, because there goes that argument completely, that you've just torpedoed yourself. So that's why if anyone ever, if I'm doing PR, if somebody reaches out for comment, you have a comment. Even if it's an off the record, on background comment, if someone gives you the chance to have some of your voice in their article, you have to take it, because you can never then say it was unfair, because they give you a chance to make it fair, and you declined.
Yeah.
PR one-on-one, you never offer a no comment.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, okay, dropping knowledge here. But no, I want to get into more of these questions too about, the existential sense of combat sports, its future. It's always kind of right in this line of civil, uncivility. And, a lot of people, it's been brought up again, as you say, cockfighting's been brought up again, the human cockfighting. So thank you again. This has been a treat for us to explore these issues with you and what you've been through firsthand, being part of these stories that I'm telling you help bring us to love this sport. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. It's been awesome. Been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know you guys will be watching on Saturday, so I'll follow you on Twitter, all of you.
Right.
Especially yours, Aunt, if you're calling things out.
I probably won't be watching this. I had to watch every UFC fight for so many years. It's very nice to pick and choose now. It really is. It's a luxury. I'd much rather be playing Minecraft with my 6-year-old or something like that.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I know. Well, we'll tell you what you need to know.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Have a good night. Take care.
Bye.